In 1929, Hollywood awarded its very first Academy Award for Best Actor. The winner wasn't Gary Cooper or Charlie Chaplin, or even an American. It was Emil Jannings, a Swiss-born, German-raised actor whose powerful performances had made him one of the greatest stars of the silent era. But Jannings' legacy would not be golden statues or international acclaim. Instead, history remembers him as the man who went from Oscar winner to propaganda star for Adolf Hitler's Third Reich. This is the story of Emil Jannings, a career that soared to the heights of filmdom and crashed into infamy under the shadow of Nazi Germany. Emil Jannings was born in Switzerland in 1884. His father, an American businessman from St. Louis, died while Jannings was still a child. His mother moved them to Germany, where a restless and imaginative Jannings longed for the stage. In 1906, he achieved a breakthrough when he was accepted into Max Reinhardt's celebrated company in Berlin, one of the most prestigious theaters in Europe. Under Reinhardt's direction, Jannings learned to use his imposing frame, expressive face, and booming voice to dominate an audience. Silent films proved a perfect fit. His heavy features and ability to project raw emotion without words made him one of the most compelling performers of Germany's new film industry. The 1920s were the golden age of German silent cinema, and Jannings was at its center. In F.W. Murnau's The Last Laugh, in 1924, he played an aging hotel doorman who is stripped of his uniform and his dignity. The part demanded he convey despair, humiliation, and fleeting joy without a single line of dialogue, and his performance became a textbook example of silent film acting. A year later, in the film Variety, he portrayed a trapeze artist ruined by passion and betrayal. The daring camera work and his raw emotional performance made the film a worldwide hit. In Faust, in 1926, directed once again by Murnau, Jannings embodied Mephisto, the devil himself, seductive, menacing, and unforgettable. These roles cemented Jannings' reputation as the master of tragic, larger-than-life characters, men of authority and stature brought low by fate or their own weakness. It was exactly the kind of artistry Hollywood was hungry for. In 1927, Paramount lured Jannings to America, offering him a lucrative contract and considerable influence over his projects. He quickly found success. In 1927's The Way of All Flesh, he played a respectable banker whose life unravels after a single mistake. The film is now lost, but contemporary reviews praised his devastating performance. The following year, in Josef von Sternberg's The Last Command, he portrayed a former Russian general reduced to working as a Hollywood extra, a role that mirrored his own displacement in America, and was hailed as one of the greatest performances of the silent era. When the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences created its first awards in 1929, Jannings was named the very first Best Actor winner for both The Way of All Flesh and The Last Command. But he was not in Hollywood to collect the honor. The famous photograph of Jannings holding the Oscar, often mistaken for a triumphant moment on ceremony night, had actually been staged earlier by Paramount's publicity department, anticipating his absence. The winners had been announced months earlier, and by the time of the ceremony, Jannings had already sailed back to Germany. He knew the arrival of sound cinema had ended his prospects in America. His thick German accent and halting English made him unsuitable for talkies, and rather than fade away in Hollywood, he chose to return home. He went down in history as the first actor to hold the statuette, but in reality, he was already finished in Hollywood. Back home, Jannings landed what would become his most famous role. In 1930, director von Sternberg cast him in The Blue Angel, opposite a young Marlene Dietrich. Jannings played Professor Rath, a pompous teacher whose obsession with nightclub singer Lola Lola, played by Dietrich, destroys his career, his reputation, and ultimately his dignity. What made the film unusual was that it was shot twice, once in German and once in English. This practice was common in the early sound era, before dubbing and subtitles became standard. For Jannings, it was a reminder of why Hollywood had cast him aside. His heavy accent and awkward delivery made the English version stiff and unconvincing. For Dietrich, it was the opposite. Her smoky voice and natural charisma carried across both languages. The German version made her a sensation in Europe, and the English version introduced her to American audiences, paving her way to Hollywood stardom. But as Germany descended into dictatorship, Jannings' career took a darker turn. When the Nazis came to power in 1933, Josef Goebbels, Hitler's propaganda minister, moved quickly to bring German cinema under state control. Many Jewish and anti-Nazi filmmakers fled. Jannings stayed. It's important to note that Jannings did not officially join the Nazi Party. There is no record of him ever holding a party membership card. But he remained in Germany, accepted Goebbels' patronage, and became one of the regime's most prominent cultural collaborators. Goebbels even awarded him the prestigious title of State Actor, a designation reserved for the Reich's most prized performers. In 1937, Jannings starred in The Ruler, playing an authoritarian industrialist presented as the embodiment of strong leadership. The film drew praise within the regime, and even Hitler himself approved of the message. Soon after, Jannings underscored his loyalty by campaigning for the Nazis in the 1938 Reichstag elections, the last sham vote of the Nazi era. Goebbels rewarded him with unusual authority for an actor. Jannings was placed on the board of Toby's Films and granted broad control over the studio's productions. His first project there, in 1939, combined his star power with his new executive role. The film Robert Koch, the Conqueror of Death, celebrated Koch's scientific breakthroughs but also reflected the regime's darker worldview, portraying his experiments on colonial African subjects as part of a heroic German tradition. The most controversial of all Jannings' films was 1941's Ohm Kruger. Goebbels wanted a picture that would inflame German audiences in advance of a possible invasion of Britain, and he gave it one of the largest budgets of the era, 6 million Reichsmarks, the equivalent of about $28 million today. Jannings not only starred in the film, he also produced it and launched a press campaign to promote his portrayal of Paul Kruger, the aging Boer president of the South African Republic, remembered for leading his people during the Second Boer War against Britain at the turn of the 20th century. He even wrote the foreword to a new edition of Kruger's diaries, calling British imperialism a pernicious disease, and declaring, "President Kruger was the first conscious champion against England. He is an example for us Germans who are now leading the fight against British imperialism. I played him because he was chosen to start a struggle which shall be concluded in our lifetime." The film was everything Goebbels had hoped for, a propaganda triumph that painted Britain as cruel and corrupt while presenting Germany as Kruger's spiritual heir. Hitler adored it. As a reward, Goebbels elevated Jannings beyond his earlier title of state actor and proclaimed him Artist of the State. He was also presented with the Ring of Honor of the German cinema. Abroad, Mussolini praised the picture, and the Venice Film Festival awarded it the Mussolini Cup for Best Foreign Film. The following year, Jannings returned to another role he had made famous in the silent era, Otto von Bismarck. In 1942's The Dismissal, he portrayed the Iron Chancellor forced into retirement by Kaiser Wilhelm II. The film presented Bismarck as a visionary betrayed by weaker men, a clear parallel to Hitler's own image as a misunderstood genius. When the Reich collapsed in 1945, so too did Jannings' career. The Allies halted production on what would have been his final picture, Where is Mr. Belling?, shutting it down before completion. He was never prosecuted, but he was effectively blacklisted. Allied authorities declared him subject to denazification. One legendary story says Jannings approached American soldiers holding his Oscar, begging for leniency as a, quote, Hollywood man. In a 1945 newspaper interview, he claimed he had been ordered by Goebbels to make propaganda films. But the excuse rang hollow. Goebbels' own diaries told the truth. In April 1941, the propaganda minister wrote, "He works as though possessed on his Boer film. Jannings outdoes himself. Kruger is as much of an anti-England film as one can only hope for." In his autobiography, published posthumously in 1951, Jannings devotes fewer than 100 words to defending his work for the Nazis. For a man who had poured so much into those films, his silence was damning. After the war, Jannings retreated to his villa in Austria. He never appeared in another film. In 1950, at the age of 65, He died of liver cancer. It took years for the full truth around his propaganda role to become clear outside Germany. In 1960, a decade after his death, his name was placed on the Hollywood Walk of Fame at 1630 Vine Street. Tourists still pass it today, though the official website makes no mention of his Nazi past. The contradiction remains. Emil Jannings, both celebrated as film royalty and condemned as a willing servant of tyranny. Thanks for watching. Please remember to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below.